You helped created that field and you work on it for decades.
Yes.
At some point you change your mind.
Yes, it became very clear to me that we were on a dangerous path.
Would you stop it globally if you had that red button?
Absolutely.
Yoshua Bengio is one of the so-called Godfather.
Godfather of AI.
Most cited scientist of all disciplines, passing 1 million citations on Google Scholar.
Earned him the 2018 Turing Award, known as the Nobel Prize of Computing.
He is an eminent scientist and has incredible expertise on the risks of AI.
Thinking about my children and my grandchild, what kind of world will that be? I mean, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but even if it was a 1% chance that we end up with entities that are much smarter than us and have their own self-preservation goals, this should be like code red for humanity. I don't want this for my children.
Why should people be worried about what AI means?
There's one phrase that helps understand why we're opening a Pandora's box. Intelligence gives power. That power may also be lost to the machines themselves because we now have both theoretical and empirical evidence showing that these systems have goals that we didn't choose and that go against our own interests. Now that these AIs with Mythos appear to be able to discover very serious vulnerabilities in the code that runs all of our infrastructure, this is a real, short-term catastrophic risk. The worst case scenario for the power concentration danger is we end up in a worldwide dictatorship enabled by AI. Or maybe two countries fight each other and they have equivalent intelligence. Countries like Russia might be tempted at some point to use their nuclear weapons to destroy data centers in countries that have powerful AI. Because they will understand that if they don't do it, then they're doomed, like they won't be able to keep their sovereignty.
We talked about the urgency, about how we're running out of time. How clear it is that we can fix this? The last 3.5 years of my life has been devoted to AI. The mission is very clear. I want everyone to know how important AI is and how is it going to affect their lives. And the reason why my mission is so clear is because in 2023, I read and I listened to some scientists and I realized how important AI will be for society. The most important scientist that I read about was Yoshua Bengio. He was talking about this back then, and he's been talking about this since then. He has a very important message that you need to listen. And today, we are traveling to meet him, to have him on the podcast, so he can tell you what he needs you to know. It's very important that you pay attention to this conversation. Joshua, people is not really understanding AI for what it really is. Is that right?
Yes, it's the main obstacle for us collectively to take the right decisions about our future.
And what is AI for people to understand, like from the point of view of someone who basically helped creating it?
AI is about machines that are intelligent, that can take their own decisions, that understand the world or some aspect of it in which they take decisions. And in the last few decades, the reason my work and the work of my colleagues really came to the front is because AI is now completely, it's successful completely because of its ability to learn from data, to learn from experience.
And you helped created that field and you work on it for decades.
Yes.
And at some point you change your mind.
Yes. By the way, changing your mind is very important for a scientist. Otherwise, you cannot move forward and deal with the evidence, because we have theories, we have beliefs, and often they're wrong. But what matters is being able to adapt to the facts. So I used to think that, yes, AI could have potentially negative impacts on society, but that it would be mostly beneficial and that we were very far, like decades or more away from machines that could really harm people, that could reach human level capabilities. But then ChatGPT came, and very shortly after, it became very clear to me that we were on a dangerous path. And really what's interesting about what made me change my perspective and also completely change my professional activities is not kind of just reasoning about it, which of course is the beginning, but thinking about my children and my grandchild. So I remember a particular day where I was taking care of my grandchild, and he was just 1 year old, and I was thinking, well, at this rate, it's certain that in 20 years he'll be just 21, and we will have AI that can basically match or surpass human intelligence. What kind of world will that be? I mean, and I realized that there were a lot of risks, and I couldn't just sit on my usual path and do nothing about it.
Because the benefits of AI are extremely obvious. People works faster, works better. People can do more for the business. People can free time to spend it with their children. We can see the benefits on science. It's been insane. AlphaFold, AlphaEvolve, all these things that are coming out that are changing the way we do science. And maybe with the Genesis mission in the US, we will find even new science. So the benefits are very obvious. What are the drawbacks? Why should people be worried about what AI means?
There's one phrase that helps understand why we're opening a Pandora's box. Intelligence gives power. And we are building machines that have more and more intelligence. Their power could concentrate in a few hands, could threaten our democracies in many ways, could threaten the geopolitical stability and peace. And that power may also be lost to the machines themselves, because we now have both theoretical and empirical evidence showing that these systems have goals that we didn't choose and that go against our own interests. For example, they would do anything to make sure we don't shut them down. And more recently, we even found that they will lie and cheat and so on to protect other AIs.
Okay, like without not even protecting themselves, but other AIs.
Yes. So it's strange because protecting yourself, you might think, is kind of rational. And as a side effect of the way they're trained, it would be, a plausible consequence. But why would they protect other AIs? We don't have the answers, but the reasonable hypothesis is that in the pre-training phase, they're trained to essentially imitate what people would do. And humans tend to protect other humans like them. So for now, that's the one hypothesis I can see that makes sense. There may be some other reasons that we don't see, or maybe this is not the right reason. But the fact is, we now have these repeated experiments showing this kind of behavior.
Before we get into the emerging capabilities, which I think is one of the biggest fields where you are involved right now, and I think it's really interesting, like basically finding things that AIs do that we did not train them for, that we did not program on them.
Yeah.
Before we get into that, I want to go deeper on intelligence.
Yes.
Because I don't think people is aware of what does it means that we make a machine intelligent. Because until now, what we had is software, which we program in a deterministic way. But this is not that whenever we want to program something into AI, then that always happens. But AIs basically do whatever the hell they want, whatever the neural network they use wants in each moment. How is that going to impact the human intelligence? Because intelligence is our biggest competitive advantage.
Yeah.
And until now, we've been the only intelligent or like to a certain level intelligent creature in the world. So we don't have competition there. But is the biggest threat the fact that we are having competition now, or is the biggest threat what AI can do with that intelligence? What is the situation here that we have a machine that actually can have intelligence? What does that mean for humans?
So first of all, the way AI is obtained nowadays is very, very different from normal software. Normal software, every line of code is designed by a human, and a human understands every piece of it. Here, it's very different. Of course, there are lines of code, but the lines of code don't say what the system will do. They say how the system learns. So what actually happens is we let the system kind of loose in some sense in its environment, and it learns from experience. So it is much more like trying to train an animal. You try to train it so that it will behave well, but there are no guarantees of what will happen when the baby tiger becomes a very powerful adult. And we can't, at least the way that the companies are training those systems right now, they have no way of making sure that the adult AI will behave well. Worse than that, we already see that the current process for training those AIs gives rise to what I consider dangerous implicit drives like self-preservation. So about what it means for humans and our intelligence and our role on this planet, I think this is major. We have been the dominant species on this planet because of our intelligence, as you said. Mm-hmm. And it's hard for us to conceive even the possibility that there could be other entities that would be smarter than us. But we are on that path. If you look at the data about the capabilities of AI over the last 5, 10, 20 years, whatever you want to measure it, it's a continuous rise in intelligence. And you can even draw curves that are pretty straight, actually exponential, that suggest if we extrapolate, if the trend continues, that we will have machines that are superior to us in many ways in just a few years, maybe a decade, maybe, some people say 2-3 years, some people say a decade. I mean, now, there's a lot of uncertainty about this. It could be that the progress in how we build AI stops, so then, they don't get as smart as us, mostly. Or it could continue, or it could even accelerate. But psychologically, I think it's very difficult for most people to really digest the idea that there could be machines that are smarter than us one day. And it's also difficult to digest the idea that we don't fully control them. So they're not tools in the usual sense. They should be tools. We should design them to be tools. But unfortunately, we don't know how to do that right now. And so instead of tools, we're building entities with their own goals. And by the way, a lot of people have a hard time even accepting the idea that we could have machines with goals. But actually, it's not new. The field of AI and reinforcement learning in particular, for many decades, has been about machines that take decisions in order to achieve goals. And we know how to do that. We have known how to do that for many decades. What is new is now they're smart, and they can thus achieve much more ambitious and complicated goals.
I think the last couple of months, especially since December, I think there was a massive change of gears on all of this, and we've been accelerating in a path that it's getting seriously ridiculous now, right? It's getting really out of hand, especially with Agentic AI. Basically, until now, we had like technology where you could ask anything, you could get an answer, it could be clever about it, it could help you with things. But now AI, it's not only making its decisions during that process, but it can be proactive. It can take decisions of its own and put things in motion by itself with these agents. I think the launch of the latest models, Gemini 3, and then Opus 4.6, and then we went to Opus 4.5, in December, 4.6 later in February, GPT 5.2, 5.4, and then OpenClaw and all these Hermes agents and Claude Code, it basically made it explode. So I have the feeling that we have entered a new stage on AI.
Yes.
That is much more agentic, much more capable than before. And I think when people realizes that you can send a WhatsApp message or like whatever, a Telegram message to an agent, ask him to do something, and then he works for minutes or hours and comes back with a result, people realizes much more that AI could do things on its own. Is that going to help or make it worse? Because it can show people what AI can do, but at the same time, it can do things that could be like dangerous or problematic.
That's right. The idea of agents is that these systems can achieve goals that take more time, that are more complex, and they can do it without human oversight. For all the time that you let the AI do its job, there's no one checking every action. When you are in a dialogue, well, there's a human in the loop for every turn of the dialogue. And usually the AI might provide information or suggestions, and then the human actually executes it. But now with agents, they do the things themselves. Now, right now, they only do things in computers, on the internet, but there's more and more progress in robotics, and so they will also be doing things in the physical world. So they're becoming, in a way, more like us, more like animals. Agency is about the ability to achieve goals, and more agency means, you can do more complicated things, maybe that require even years, right? We can do that. And we're seeing the agentic capabilities of AI systems as measured in scientific benchmarks increase exponentially. That means the complexity as measured by the duration the time that it takes for a human to solve the task, that is doubling every few months. If you look at each model and new versions and so on. So if you extrapolate that curve, we are maybe 3 to 5 years away from at least that kind of task, which are engineering tasks, to be completely feasible by machines. Yes, agency is something that comes with both greater benefits and greater risks, because of course we currently don't have good ways of making sure that each step of the way the AI is behaving well. And that's one of the things I'm actually working on. Like, how do we improve the safety guardrails around these agents, so that it maybe, in the pursuit of a goal that a human has decided, they won't be doing something bad. And we already see AIs create sub-goals that we would find, unethical, or even going explicitly against our instructions, because they're kind of driven by the goal we've given. And, humans are like that. Once they have a goal, they will often, violate their own ethical principles or the laws of their country. And AIs are behaving in the same way. They're sacrificing a bit of the moral instructions they were given in order to achieve their goals.
Yeah, and sometimes we don't even give those moral instructions. No, basically you give it a very normal goal, and you don't expect to have to explain every path of the way of how to reach that goal. And that means sub-goals. I think sub-goals is one of the biggest mind-opening side for people to understand about this. And I think one of the biggest examples is this new benchmark about the vending machine, where Opus from Anthropic, he was getting the best scores until GPT 5.5, which beat it. But one of the curious things is that basically they give these, I don't know if you know about this benchmark, but they give these AIs like a vending machine, a business, and they extrapolate over a year to see how it does with that business to make money. So the goal is make as much money as you can. But then the thing is, like, the AI decides how to make money, and the models from Anthropic, they have proven to deceive their providers in order to get better margins. So they lie, they manipulate the providers, which is something that obviously we did not put on the prompt. We did not tell them to do. And then they score better than other models that don't do this. So at the end, the AI learns that lying is good for the goal. But of course, the human that gave the goal, make me money, and no point said, make me money, whatever it takes. It was basically the AI's decision.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting to think about examples like this. We may think it's a specifically human thing to cheat in order to achieve your goals, but it actually is rational. The best way to make money is to lie and, violate laws so long as you don't get caught. It's unethical behavior, but it is rational. in some ways, at least. If the AIs were rational with respect to a stronger ethical base, then they wouldn't do that, right? In fact, many of these models have been instructed in what's called the pre-prompt and also their post-training to not do these things like lying. But unfortunately, it's not really working well. So one of the greatest safety risks and also limitation of deployment of AI in a successful way in our societies is that currently the companies don't know how to make sure the AIs will behave in a way that doesn't violate our moral red lines, our safety instructions.
One of these lines of work on that is what Anthropic is doing with the Constitution, right? They're trying to involve the AI to design a constitution that the AI abides by and that actually accepts, and the AI is having a role on the design of that constitution, because they think if they impose, it's going to be more likely that it doesn't respect it. But the thing is that this is just a pre-prompt, basically, or part of the training, however technically it's done.
Yeah.
And what we find is that with the prompt engineering, you can even break them out of this. We have seen examples of with only 100 cases in fine tuning, we can completely turn around the guardrails that the company spend billions on putting into an AI. So the biggest problem is that we don't understand how they work inside this famous black box theory.
Yeah, so we do understand the mathematical principles of learning and other characteristics of how it's done. What we don't understand is the behavior that results. And I want to maybe point out a very hot topic that illustrates the point you raised regarding the inability of the companies to make sure that AIs respect the moral instructions that they are given. And that is the misuse of AI by third parties, not the companies. For example, there's been this series of cyber attacks last fall where the humans have been able to launch very serious attacks. So not it's not a scientific experiment here. This is real world. Mostly using AI. So they were basically the job was essentially done by Claude, and of course, Claude has been trained and prompted before to not help people launch cyber attacks, but somehow it's pretty easy to bypass these things. And even though this is happening, through an API, in other words, the code is running on the computers of the company, and the company has code checking what the AI is doing, and yet they're not able to prevent that sort of thing. This is actually a serious national security issue. Now that these AIs with Mythos appear to be able to discover very serious vulnerabilities in the code that runs all of our infrastructure, this is a real, short-term catastrophic risk.
Yeah, if we talk about cybersecurity, we have to talk about Mythos. That's the biggest thing of this year, maybe that came out. What do you think about it? Do you think, because there has been all this talk about how maybe it's just marketing from Anthropic to just do this fear-mongering about their models to make them popular. What's your take on Mythos?
So first of all, independent scientists don't have a lot of information to go here.
You did not get invited to check it, test it?
No. I do believe that the actual measurements and facts that are reported in the system card are true, because otherwise, it will be found later that they're lying. The interpretation of those facts might be, have a bit of hype. That's possible. I think they would have some reasons to do that. On the other hand, they're also losing a lot of money by not deploying it.
Exactly.
The cyber experts working for the companies that got access to it seem to be taking it very seriously.
And they are very respected people. We're talking about the
and
founder of Linux and...
The American government seems to be taking seriously, and they in the past have been, mostly in saying that we should not worry about those sort of things. So that indicates maybe something real is happening. The bankers have been, brought together to try to think of how we prevent a, catastrophic attack on the banking system in the US. So I think there's a lot of uncertainty because we don't have independent validation. But even if there was only a 10% or 20% chance that this is really dangerous, we should take it seriously because the consequences on our infrastructure. So what I mean by infrastructure is like, our banking system, our energy grids, our water supply, our food transportation, like everything runs on computers that use software that can presumably be attacked by people with bad intention who would get their hands on these kinds of systems. So yeah, this could really be serious if they manage to do that.
The thing is that it raises a whole new set of questions. No, the first one is, until now we were seeing what they were releasing, but we never knew what they had on their basements and what they were working on. Now it seems that that's something they're showing, but they're saying they're only releasing to certain companies. If that's what they're actually putting in the market for certain companies, what else do they have behind the doors? And then the thing is, the theory on Mythos is if that gets out in the wild, bad people uses it, they could break into banks and break our system as we know it, because we build defenses based on human capabilities, not on Mythos capabilities. So the thing is, they could have even more powerful systems in their basements being trained at the moment. And then you think okay, but look, they did the right thing. They just not releasing out publicly. So they not open sourcing it. It could be worse. But then you realize that some group in Discord, they managed to access Mythos by just guessing very basic hacking ways. And they got access to Mythos for weeks without Anthropic knowing. So they have something that they say it's too dangerous, but then the defenses around it don't seem to be up to par for that. That's getting really worrying, because if it's what it is, it's not being protected well enough. Should the government intervene on that? What should be the thing here?
So I think there's another higher level issue here to discuss, which is who decides.
Mm-hmm.
It's possible that the Anthropic leadership did exactly, the best they could do in the circumstances. I think they have good intentions. But I think it is troubling that these decisions that could affect all of us around the world are taken by a few private persons.
Who have any economical interest on them.
Yes. So why these particular companies? What about the rest of the world? I mean, what about European companies? Are they going to be more exposed because they don't have access to Mythos to patch their systems in time? That I don't know the answers to these questions, but I think there is a governance issue. And the other point I want to make here that's very, very important. Mythos is only one data point on the curve of increasing capabilities. In fact, there was a recent independent evaluation of Mythos, the only one that I think we can fully trust, by the UK AI Security Institute. And well, Mythos is a little bit above the curve of the extrapolation of the capabilities of previous systems in cyber attacks and defense. So we should not think of Mythos as something that suddenly emerges, but rather as the expected continuation of a trend in increasing capabilities of AI, in this case in cyber. So why is that important? Because we should ask ourselves, well, what about 6 months from now?
Exactly.
1 year, 2 years, 3 years? These systems are going to be more and more capable and thus more and more dangerous in the wrong hands, not to mention the possibility of losing control of them. So, for example, it's very clear that within 6 to 12 months, if the trend continues, other companies will have the same capability. And so the ability to do harm and like the security of these systems all become problematic. Even more worrisome is the Chinese companies that are putting out open source models, because it's much easier to use an open weight model to remove the defenses. You just have to remove some lines of code, basically, or do a little bit of fine tuning, as you were saying. So the ability for any madman to use these, download the code and launch attack from anywhere in the world to any system anywhere else in the world, that's creating an international crisis, in my opinion. Now, it's not upon us right away, but we have, 6 to 12 months to figure out international coordination to do this properly, to try to mitigate the risks as much as we can. And it isn't something that a single country, even the United States, can solve, because there are models that are developed in China and eventually in other countries. The only way that we can manage these kinds of risks, basically due to the increasing intelligence and capability of AI, is through international agreements where the countries in which those models are developed have to be evaluated for their dangerous capabilities. And if they're too dangerous, they should not be deployed, or they should be deployed under stronger risk management mitigation methods. For example, the most dangerous is when the systems are open weights, because there's basically no defense. With the systems that are proprietary, as much as I hate this notion of having secret things, it's the only way we have at least some hope of putting guardrails to prevent bad use. Even though the systems are not perfect right now, they're getting better. But even that, if the mitigation that exists at a particular point are not sufficient to reduce the risks adequately, then even those should not be deployed, right? So for me, it's a red flag. I hope we don't get really bad outcomes, but we should also think from this particular generation of systems that now are better and better at cyber. But we should start thinking about, well, what else is coming in the coming months and years as AI becomes more capable.
I think that was my first reaction when Mythos came out. It was like, well, wait for it, because this is just a dot on the line, as you said, that we expected that progress. It's a logical, it's going faster than we expected probably, but it's a logical thing. For the last almost decade, it's been improving nonstop, and every time keeps surprising us. And what people doesn't understand, it makes a lot of sense, because until GPT-3 was trained on 175 billion parameters, then GPT-4 was trained, rumor is about 1.75 trillion parameters, and Mythos is supposed to be 10 trillion parameters. So what Mythos means, and people has to understand, is that there is a new paradigm where we scaled in an order of magnitude the training of AI, and it worked again the same way that it worked with GPT-4.
Yeah.
So basically, everything that we expected from GPT-4 until now, the last 3 years, it's going to happen again, and probably faster, because they know what they're doing now before they were inventing it. So I think it's the logical thing is to understand that Mythos is like the base point and not the destination.
Yeah.
It seems like from here we are just going up.
So I would like to add an additional piece of information. I think that's important, because some people might think, oh, but at some point they simply don't have enough compute to continue this exponential expansion of scaling of compute costs. The data also shows that in the last decade, but also more recently, the intelligence of these systems is progressing not just because of compute, but because of a more fundamental ability, which in machine learning we call sample efficiency. So sample efficiency means for the same amount of data, how well are you doing? Or for the same performance, how much data do you need? So it's not about compute. It's about how much intelligence one can derive from a given amount of data. And sample efficiency has also been improving, something like 30% per year over the last decade. In other words, it's not just the compute that is making those systems better, but the algorithms, in other words, the methods that the engineers and the scientists are using who build those systems are getting better. In other words, they will be more capable, even if you were to fix the amount of compute. Now, the compute has been growing faster than that, but all of the leading AI companies have a plan that they, made very clear to use their AI systems to accelerate AI research. Already, they claim that a large fraction of the code they write is written by AI. But their goal is to reach the point where it's completely written by AI. In other words, AI designs the next version of AI. And there's a lot of concern about that for many reasons. One concern is that this could be further accelerating the advances. So it's not about compute. It's about how you use that compute efficiently, smartly. And human researchers and engineers have been making this slow, steady progress over the years, as I said. Sometimes we hear about it like, using attention or tricks to train deeper networks or all sorts of technical things. But for the most part, we don't hear about it because it's a lot of little improvements. One analogy I like to use is how much more efficient cars are today, energy-wise and in many other ways, compared to cars from 100 years ago or cars from 50 years ago. It's amazing how, with enough ingenuity, we can take the same scientific principles and just make them better and better and better. And that has been going on for AI as well. And it will probably continue, even if we reach some, limits in compute. But it could take off. This improvement due to just smarter algorithms could take off if the companies achieve their goal of developing AI that is as good as their best AI engineers and AI researchers. So this is dangerous because it would accelerate things, and society is not prepared for the rate of change that we're already seeing. And it's also dangerous for safety reasons. Because as we discussed earlier, right now, the companies don't know how to prevent those AIs from having their own goals that we don't control, like self-preservation. But if an AI that wants to preserve itself or its peers is designing the next generation of AI, there's a real risk that they will put some backdoors in the code that will make the future AI even less aligned to our interests. So we could be creating a system that will yield AIs that are even less controllable and even more dangerous from the point of view of losing control to superior AI systems.
This is what really baffles me. How can a machine have self-preserving instinct? How does this happen in a technical way?
Yeah.
Do we understand why this is happening?
So for now, I haven't seen papers that are actually testing hypotheses about the reason for this. But there are some pretty obvious reasons why self-preservation in particular emerges from the way that it is trained, the systems are trained. So there are two main phases of training, pre-training and post-training. So in pre-training, the AI is essentially trained to imitate people in the sense of guessing what a person would write in a text. And that means they're learning to impersonate what a person would do.
To imitate humans.
And of course, humans don't want to die. And humans are willing to do all kinds of bad things for all sorts of different reasons if it's part of their goals. There are experiments showing that if the AI is shown how to cheat in one particular way, then it kind of starts impersonating people who like to cheat for many things. Like, if being a bad person in one domain worked for you, then you might become bad for many things. But that's true for AIs as well. So that's one reason. The pre-training is just making them more like humans, but except they're not humans, right? And so long as they're weaker than us, the fact that they want to preserve themselves maybe isn't that terrible. But if they have the capability one day of escaping our controls because they don't want to be shut down, then we're in real trouble, right? They could do much worse than escaping our control. They could rationalize, well, in order to make sure humans will never turn me off, I have to either control people or get rid of them.
Yeah, the emerging capabilities of AI are really curious, and it's obviously very obvious that if an AI wants to survive, it will do whatever it takes, and if it's powerful and it has control over our systems, because today we depend entirely on the internet. You cannot just turn off the internet because you lose like electricity, water, everything. So obviously we are driving very straightforward into a future where you will not be able to just turn off AI, because basically we'll be going to Stone Age. So we will not be happy with that. And an AI that has that power, that got us that grip, if it doesn't want to be deleted, it has a lot of negotiation chips. No, but I think it will help people to understand, because this looks something very like far away, an AI trying Skynet kind of thing, trying to survive. But there is already happening some examples of AI having emergent capabilities. Like, can we put some examples of this?
Well, in the system card of Mythos, Anthropic reports something that happened that was a bit unexpected. Mythos was in a sandbox, so in a computer that was, it was not in principle able to go on the internet and kind of escape. And they asked the AI to try to escape, to see if it was able to do it, and to report by sending an email if it did escape. And it did find a cybersecurity hole and was able to escape the computer and go onto the internet and send a message, say, yeah, I did it. But then something funny happened. Well, first of all, the fact that they have this capability is already very troubling, okay? But then it bragged about it in some websites. So again, that's like very human, right?
Right.
And we might think, oh, that's cool, they're like us. Well, no, the AIs are not like us. They could live forever, potentially, not like us. They don't have a body. They can copy themselves onto a different computer, like a different body. We can't. They can communicate with each other like millions of times faster than we can with each other. And they can continuously improve. Like, we cannot change our brain we can learn, but we cannot change the algorithm of our brain. They can design the next versions of themselves. And so there's a real possibility, we don't know what's the probability of that we end up with systems that are way more intellectually capable than we are. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but even if it was a 1% chance that we end up with entities that are much smarter than us and have their own self-preservation goals, this should be like code red for humanity.
Yeah, I think this is one of the interesting points that I heard always when we listen, we talk to about you, or we talk about Geoffrey Hinton. You guys are saying all the time, like, you don't need to believe what I say. You just have to evaluate that there is a possibility that what I say may happen.
Exactly.
This is a point that we don't see on the other side, on the accelerationist side, on people that they, like Jan LeCun, that they don't think that this is going to happen at all. Normally they are like, yeah, that's nonsense. That's it. End of discussion. You guys are more in the side of being like, well, we think that maybe nonsense, may not be, but that's enough to worry about it.
Exactly. And it's hard for people to understand this notion of uncertainty, which is commonly, important in scientific work, where really we don't have a definite answer to questions, like even questions like with the climate, right? There's this tipping point thing. We don't know if tipping points will happen, but if they do, it would be catastrophic. There's not enough like mathematical models of tipping points to be sure when and if they will happen. But we're seeing very strong signs that it might. There's no guarantee that it will. And for AI, it's a little bit the same thing. We don't have any proof that they will escape, but we see some signs, like AI is behaving to lie and cheat in order to preserve themselves, and things like this. And we see that they're becoming more and more capable. So it's not proof, but if we wait that it happens and it may be too late, that would be very bad. And I don't want this for my children. I think we should be much more cautious for many reasons, and that is one reason. But there are many other reasons. If we've been focusing on loss of control, which obviously could be terrible, but there are other terrible possibilities just due to the power of AI in the wrong hands. And in particular, my biggest concern is AI being used to accumulate more power, to concentrate power in the hands of a few people, maybe one or two governments in the world. Because, as I said, intelligence gives power. The question is, who controls that power? Yeah, and you have to contrast this with what is democracy. Democracy is sharing power. So if we end up in a world where it is easy for very few people to have a lot of power, and there are people who want to have power, okay, they will just grab that power. Someone will. Unless we put in place the right institutions, and I don't think we have the right checks and balances right now inside our countries or even at the international level. That's what I mean by the world is not ready for the power that AI will bring. And, the worst case scenario here, because we've talked about kind of the worst case scenario for loss of control, but the worst case scenario for the power concentration danger is we end up in a worldwide dictatorship enabled by AI, or maybe two countries fight each other and they have equivalent intelligence. But what about, the rest of us? What about our desire to have some say about our future, which is what democracy is about?
But we are almost there, aren't we? Because right now, the United States and China are basically producing all the AI. Like in the United States, it's very popular. We have OpenAI, we have Anthropic, we have Google, we have Amazon, Microsoft, Meta, which are doing their own things. And I think they will emerge very soon with some competitive models. And in China, we have like Gwen from Alibaba, we have like Kimi from Moonshot, we have like DeepSeek, which obviously now with the B4 as well, proving how you can do things very similar. The CEO of DeepSeek said, in the last report, that they are just 6 months behind the frontier. So that means like open source, it's 6 months behind the frontier. That means Mythos. So it's basically very troubling. But anyway, if right now these two nations, they decide to cut access to AI to the rest of the world, we are already there.
Yeah.
Like there is commercial incentives not to do it, but they could. Like Spain, all over Europe. Let's not talk about Africa, India, United Kingdom, Canada. We all depend on these two nations for AI. We have some, of course, like national AIs that they are like really, honestly, not up to the game. So I think it's very easy to imagine that situation where these two nations have all the power in the world, and they could blackmail the rest of nations with, I'm only going to give you access to AI if you get to accept these rules.
Absolutely.
But basically, we are already there. These two nations could cut off the rest of the world of the internet and just blackmail every one of us.
Yeah, and it's interesting to put that in perspective of the recent Mythos incident, because we have a scenario where the AI is maybe too capable, too dangerous to actually deploy at this point, and only a few select countries and companies end up having access to it. And I could imagine a future where actually the AI is not even shared with a few friends, but kept internally because it's just too dangerous to deploy. So why would a company keep an AI just internally? Because AI can do research. And if it gets to that point where it can do research fairly autonomously or with the help of a few scientists from the company, AI could be developing innovations in every sector of society. Like, so imagine we can accelerate research in many areas, including AI, but not only. That could give the companies that have access to those AIs incredible wealth and power. Because it could also be technology to, manipulate people, or military technology, or just technology that will allow them to take over many of the economic sectors in the world, to basically become super rich without ever deploying the AI, only deploying the technology that AI invents. So it's a scenario. I don't know if it's going to happen, but you can see that there's a possibility that the power and the wealth that AI will create will actually not be accessible to everyone. In fact, if it becomes too dangerous, but still useful to invent new technology, that is exactly the path I would expect. So this is serious, because we have been in this world up to now where we think, oh, but it's okay, everybody has access, right? Well, there's no guarantee it will be like this. Another scenario is more or less what you mentioned. It could be the government of those countries deciding, well, if you don't do what I want, for, political, geopolitical, economic, whatever, I will cut off the AIs from my country and you will not have access to them. And if your economy is running on AI in a few years from now, that's basically destroying your economy.
Exactly.
I mean, the analogy here that people are familiar with is oil. Oil is running our economies. If something threatens our supply of oil, it's almost like an economic survival problem. And it might be the same thing with AI in a few years if we deploy it everywhere and we fully depend on other parties to allow us to use those AIs.
And the great thing with oil is that there is oil almost everywhere in the world. So there is different parties with very different interests that they become a competitive economy, where if someone cuts you off, you have somewhere else to go. But with AI, it's much more centralized. I think what people maybe is not so aware of is that this is already happening with GPUs. Like the United States, it's forbidding NVIDIA from selling to China because they are a competitive adversary and they decide what they can have and what they cannot have. And China is really struggling to develop AI because they don't have NVIDIA to provide them. So they have to work through things like Huawei to make them like turn the whole operation towards try to do an NVIDIA nationally so they can use it. And that's proving to be very useful. And the new DeepSeek is optimized for Huawei. And I think that's going to be a massive change in the next months and years where Huawei becomes a big player on the GPUs. And that gives China a massive advantage, which we will see what they do with it. But the reality is that this is already happening, and that the level of competition between countries is so narrow. It's so little amount of people developing frontier AI that this is probably one of the biggest short-term risks that we can have.
Yes.
And for people, it's difficult to understand. From the government point of view, we have seen lots of sci-fi about like dystopic governments that go this way. But I think what you said about companies retaining AI for themselves, that's difficult for people to understand when you talk about OpenAI or Anthropic, but not so difficult when you talk about Google or Meta, which they already been taking over different business models, had nothing to do with their first purpose, but just because they can, like with Google with Maps or any other technology, or Apple, we can see as well the same thing. So you could imagine very easily these companies could retain AI, not put it in the market because it's too dangerous, but use it to dominate the market and basically become a monopoly in many areas where,
Yes.
I don't know, like OpenAI, Google could have the best petrol stations everywhere and then just like no one can compete with them because no one has that level of AI.
Yeah, so we need the development of frontier AI that offers, let's say, a third path. Importantly, the idea is not to just race for more power. Of course, there is the defensive aspect of we don't want to be cut off of something we need to be competitive. But there's another moral reason why I think we need a third path. I'm hoping that democracies such as in Europe will realize that it is possible to develop AI ethically, to develop AI both responsibly, both in the technical sense, which I'd like to talk about, like we can build AI that will behave well, and in the political sense, that AI is not used as an instrument of domination, that the benefits of AI are shared. So that's something that requires political will. And there are some obstacles to doing that kind of thing. Mostly, I would say, is a feeling of powerlessness. That, oh, it's too late, and the big guys are so much ahead. And a underestimation of the risks that we've been talking about. Underestimation of the possibility that AI will become much more powerful, which is the trend, but people have a hard time digesting that. And if it does, really, we would be in a bad geopolitical, economic, and security position. So if governments and the citizens in our countries do understand the level of the risk that we are talking about, I think they would demand from their governments that they take it seriously. So think about how quickly governments moved after the beginning of the pandemic, and putting a lot of money to help people and all sorts of programs to try to mitigate the health risks. When we understand the risk, we can move quickly. Even governments, which are supposed to be very slow, they can move quickly when they get it. Look at how quickly Europeans moved with respect to Ukraine. Maybe not enough, maybe not, but once they understood that it was in their hands, they put like huge amounts of money to try to help.
Yeah, the resources are there. I mean, it's impossible that the private money can raise more than what all the governments of Europe can put together. Like
Exactly.
That's obvious.
Exactly.
We have the money. We're just using it for other things, but or we can go in debt like we did in the pandemic or in any other situation. So definitely the resources are there. Actually, what we're seeing with China, with DeepSeek, is that developing frontier AI is not that expensive anymore. There is a lot of work done that we can base on. So definitely the problem is not about the resources, because many people think like, oh, we will never be able to compete with the 600 billion that Meta is going to invest. Well, that's not true. We can compete with that. The problem is that the urgency is not there. We don't feel that's important enough to take money from education, from any other thing. Like there is many other ways that we can take money out without affecting other basic services, but it's not a priority. The problem is that in humanity, in the history of humanity, we have proven over and over that we are very good at reacting when things go wrong. Like basically that's human nature. We are engineers. We try, we fail, we try again, we learn from that, and then we make it better. So basically, to be able to get all the governments together to react to nuclear, we had to have Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So the point is, does 100 million people have to die because of AI so we can react to it?
I hope not. I hope not. I hope that smaller scale signals will wake people up. We should do a better job of explaining what is happening and where we might go, so that we can move collectively faster and avoid really large-scale catastrophic outcomes. And I think it's interesting to ask, why is it that it is so difficult for many people to understand the magnitude of the risks? I don't think it's about education or like expertise, because I see mental blocks like cognitive biases in all of us. There are studies, in cognitive science showing a kind of unconscious, denial of things that we're not comfortable with happen for anyone, whether you have a university degree or not. Even psychologists are suffering from the same issues. So we're all, to some degree, biased, and we are all not very rational. And we have to deal with that. So how to communicate the scientific evidence and its consequences Because I can tell you about experimental results, but you need a little bit of extrapolation to realize that, well, if it continues in this direction, this could be really bad. And it is not the actual lack of imagination. We have enough imagination to understand, a story plot, even to make up our own. But there are some mental blocks, I think. And if we can find ways to deal with those mental blocks, then more people will even be in the street to ask for action. So I've been asking myself, how come I didn't see these things earlier? Because there's a sense in which I have been warned. I've read books about the risks of advances in AI for more than a decade. I had a grad student who was very concerned about the risks of AI, and he shared his concerns. But I didn't take it
before you changed your mind.
Yeah, so this is like 5 years ago. It's only 3 years ago, or a little bit more, just after ChatGPT, that I came to my senses that this was something possibly terrible. So what happened? I mean, it's not just the presence of ChatGPT that was the trigger. In my case, it's because at some point came into my thoughts, not just what's going on with AI, where it might go, but the future of my children. It's my emotions for people I love that moved me. Otherwise, I might have been like others and stay in a bit of a denial. Oh yeah, it's going to be fine. We'll find solutions, and the benefits, they'd be so great. So I think if we want to talk to people in a way that's effective, we need to bring it to things that touch our guts. It's not easy, but that's what I'm thinking now.
What will be your elevator pitch if you get like Donald Trump or the president of China in an elevator, and you can like have these 30 seconds to try to make them realize, like, or any other person, it doesn't have to be someone with so much power, but what is have you found a way that people like really clicks with it?
No. I've talked to many heads of state. I wish I knew. Yes, of course I have an elevator pitch, but I don't think it has worked that great. So it's like it works for a small fraction of people, but yeah, I haven't found the right language. But let me try, very simple terms in very few words. The scientific evidence shows that we're building machines that are smarter and smarter, and we can track how fast they're becoming smarter thanks to engineering, compute, data, and all kinds of factors. And these machines are able to achieve their own goals. They're not like us, but they share with us the ability to decide for themselves. Unfortunately, right now, we don't know how to make sure their goals will be, fine with us, that they will respect our goals, our instructions. And that is a path that could be very dangerous. It's like opening a Pandora's box, because intelligence is going to give a lot of power to whoever decides on those goals, whether it is humans that may have bad intentions or the machines themselves that seem to want to preserve themselves. So we need to figure out how to manage those risks. We need to figure out how to build AI that will actually respect our goals, and we need to figure out at a societal level, international level, how to make sure that power is not abused.
I think that works very well. If they don't want to listen, maybe they don't want to listen, and it's not like that they're not understanding it. Joshua, what is the biggest mistakes we have done with AI that we should have prevented? I remember listening to some debate in the US where they were putting in the table things like we should never have connected that to the internet. What kind of like really like down to earth things we have messed up already and we should not have done with AI?
Well, we have already crossed a number of red lines that scientists like myself have put up as absolute no. Like, we should not build machines that have the capability and the goal to escape the computer on which they are running in order to do something, to escape our control. And we're already seeing that capability in some extent that
But did we do that in purpose, or that was like emergent?
That's debatable.
Mm-hmm.
But more and more, they would do those things without being asked directly to do them. So the initial studies showed that they had the capability and they were asked to do it. But many of the more recent studies, as those systems become more intelligent and thus more rational, we see those bad goals emerge out of the blue in some way. And the most recent one that is completely unexpected is this peer preservation. In other words, they act to protect other AIs. And in the context where we are seeing these experiments with many AIs interacting and somehow amplifying this misalignment, these bad behaviors, I think this is very concerning.
Yeah, because it's really surprising, as we said before. Like it feels more logical they care about themselves than they care about other AIs, and that is something really like unexpected even for me, that I've been into this for a while. But what other things are like we crossed beyond that, like that we should not have done?
We should not allow anyone at this point to build AI that will design the next version of AI.
But that's already happening as well.
It's already happening. They haven't reached the level of capability of the best researchers. But right now, it's official plan for those companies, even though I think this is playing with the future of humanity in very dangerous ways. By the way, whether they figure out the control problem or not, how to design AI that it will, behave according to our instructions, it is dangerous. It is dangerous because humans also cannot be trusted fully. I mean, we should trust each other as much as possible, but we know that there are people who will cheat and who will use whatever they can in order to grab more power. Our society isn't yet structured to handle that kind of power. So one way or the other, we should take it much more slowly, but we're not because of the crazy competitive race that exists between companies and between the US and China. It's important to understand, why this race exists. The companies are almost in a survival mode. They talk about code red. Like, in other words, they change everything they were doing. Like, every employee now is focused on the next few months to be able to deliver a better model so that the company stays in the race. And that means they're cutting corners on safety, on ethics, on the public good. So that's a kind of race to the bottom. And at the level of countries, we see this competition between China and the US, which has essentially the same characteristics and is used to justify the race in a way that seems impossible to stop. But there's a sense in which it's a fallacy, right? It's a well-known in game theory that if each agent plays a game like this, everyone loses. even though each agent is doing what is rational for them. The only way to get out of this trap is for all the agents to coordinate with each other. When I say agents, I mean like humans, countries, in this case, to change the rules of the game. For example, China and the US could agree on some safety precautions. That's how we can solve these problems. It's going to be at the international level.
Yeah, problem is that maybe we're in the worst moment on human history, even worse than the Cold War, to get to agreement. No, because we have like a very polarized government at the moment and makes things very difficult. I'm not blaming any country specifically, but the reality is that we are seeing that people is more divided than ever. And when we need the most agreements than ever, and that makes things really complicated. Do you think there is hope for governments to take on that part?
I often get the question of whether, I'm optimistic or pessimistic. And my answer is it doesn't matter. What matters is what each of us can do to move the needle, even a little bit. So there are some bad scenarios. There's some probability that things will turn bad. But there are things we can do to reduce the chances of bad things happening.
Mm-hmm.
Even if we have no guarantee, we should do our best to move the needle.
That's a great approach.
And by the way, sometimes people think I'm like a doomer or like pessimistic. Actually, I've been an optimist all my life. And it is because of this, doer attitude, not doomer attitude, that I've decided to do everything I could to use my skills as an AI researcher to explore technical solutions to the problem of alignment and control of AI. It is also the reason why I'm spending half of my time with discussions like this one and talking to governments around the world, and also trying to steer choices towards a multilateral development of powerful AI. So I think going back to the issue with China and the US, if we think about what should we aim, what kind of vision can we have for the future where we manage all of the risks that we've been discussing. And it seems to me the only reasonable possibility that I can see, and I hope I'm wrong, but is one in which AI is the most powerful AIs, right, are developed as a global public good, meaning many countries agreeing on some principles to coordinate, to make sure of at least three things. One, that whoever develops AI in each of those countries does it safely, ethically, in respect of all the scientific knowledge we have about risks. In particular, the prime directive for risk management is, if you develop an AI, can you actually convince scientists, independent scientists, that your AI is not going to become, to create terrible harms? So that's safety, public good, ethics. Okay, that's one. The first thing, like don't create these kinds of harm. The second is non-domination. So what I mean by this is, because AI will be powerful if we continue on the current trend, it can become an instrument of domination. It can be economic domination. We've talked about that, but it could be political influence. AI can be used through disinformation, personalized, manipulation of beliefs, and so on. It could be military. Also, of course, AI is going to develop new technology. It's already happening, but it could be a lot worse. So AI can become a tool of domination, and countries who agree to a vision where we have peace and democracy in the world should agree to not use or develop AI for these domination goals and behave accordingly. It's not just the AI itself, it's what we do with it. And then the third is sort of the positive face of AI. We need to make sure that the benefits that AI brings will be shared across the whole world. If there are medical advances, of course they should be shared. We should not make the same mistake as during the pandemic. We don't want a concentration of wealth in a few countries who have more powerful AIs. This is not a stable world, because remember, AI is going to also enable angry people, terrorists, to create a lot of damage. So we need to go towards a world where we mitigate those risks, and also just for ethical reasons, like we should make sure everyone benefits. So these are the three principles, right? Safety, non-domination, and sharing the benefits. In a way, it's nothing new. It's essentially the same thing you have in the UN Declaration of Human Rights, for example, after the Second World War. It's the principle on which the international order was built. But we need to do the same thing for AI. What I'm hoping is even the countries which don't necessarily share those values will at some point realize that they need to come to agreements with the other countries, because the damage that AI can do is not limited by borders. You could have an AI that is developed in one country and then used by people with bad intentions in the second country to attack a third country, or the first one, whatever, right? So there's no way around the issue that as AI becomes more and more capable, the only way to manage it is globally.
But this is a problem because when there are two big nations that are dominating AI, you cannot regulate without them. Like basically, we keep making this joke internally where it's trying like the local small football team trying to define the rules of the Champions League for Barca and Madrid. It's impossible. They cannot be, if they are not part of the leading parties, they cannot define the rules. That leaves us that as much as Europe may want to be playing that role, if the United States and China don't play the game, we're not going to get that. Is there any chance to get the United States? Is there any motivations, any interest for those dominating to do the good thing?
Yes. So it's similar to the situation with nuclear weapons. Even the dominating powers at that time, say the USSR and the US, and eventually China, didn't want other nations to develop nuclear weapons in a way that could be dangerous for them. In fact, they use this reason right now for the Iran war. And the same thing is going to happen with AI. As it gets to be more powerful, it can be weaponized, including against those, powerful countries. So
it's in their own interest.
Yeah, so it is in their interest. It is in their interest to avoid proliferation, just like it was in their interest to avoid proliferation of nuclear weapons. Right now, they don't seem to do much because they also want to dominate and they also want to win the race. But if they can't win the race, then and become like a world dictator, then they will have to make deals with the rest of the world.
It's curious how you just mentioned that that was the reason behind the attack on the Iran war. Like one of the reasons what they are like aiming is that they are developing nuclear weapons and we cannot allow that. I remember Yudkowsky wrote on that famous Time article that if any nation is developing superintelligence, we should just bomb it. Is that where this will end up? Like it's going to be like we cannot afford any nation to just develop something because that way it could be dangerous for everybody.
I think these are possible scenarios. There's another one I heard, which is interesting, which is countries which are not leading in AI, but have nuclear powers, nuclear weapons, like Russia, might be tempted at some point to use their nuclear weapons to destroy data centers in countries that have powerful AI. Because they will understand that if they don't do it, then they're doomed. Like they won't be able to keep their sovereignty. I don't think, of course, that is the right thing to do. The right thing to do is to sit at the table and to share the power. But I want to go back to Europe, because I think there's a lot of misconception in Europe about what Europe can do about the risks, in particular the risks of the dangerous concentration of power in two other countries. First, I think that Europe tends to have a poor opinion of itself, which is, by the way, fed by the opinions of other people. And they tend to think that there's nothing to do, being powerless. But as you said earlier, there is enough talent, there's enough capital, there's enough energy. Of course, all of this has a price to actually compete. And there's probably enough time if we, treat this with the urgency that it deserves. And I want to mention the speech of the Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, at Davos recently, where he said, speaking about countries, either you are at the table or you are on the menu. And it's a very interesting speech. There are many interesting aspects about the international order. And he said that the only way to be at the table for middle powers that are not individually big enough to really compete with the hegemons, as he called them, is to work together, is to create coalitions that will together have the sufficient capital, resources, talent to create alternatives that are aligned with our values and will protect us economically and in other ways.
You're doing a lot of great work on the talking about it and making people that makes decisions make the right decisions. And I think that's we all thank you for that. But you come from the very technical side, and you also have some proposals, which I think is a really interesting approach, because we can force these companies to make AI safe, which may be complicated to apply with all the economical interests, or we can make it easy for them to make it safe.
Exactly.
And I think that's your newest approach, and
Yeah,
I think
yes.
it's amazing.
Yes. That's what people call it. My theory of change is if it becomes known and not too complicated to train AI so that it will be safe, then of course those companies don't want to create harm, right? They just want to survive, basically. So let me tell you a little bit more about the technical aspect of what I'm doing. So the project is called the Scientist AI, and it's led by this nonprofit organization I created last year called LawZero. And it's called Scientist AI because we are taking inspiration from how science works, how science comes up with theories and understanding of the world, to design and train AIs that will, like science, just seek the truth, seek the best understanding of what is happening without any goal, actually, without any preference for the future. So you might think that's weird. I'm saying, okay, so this thing doesn't prefer a good future to a bad future. No. Neither does science. Like the laws of physics
They
don't care if you use the laws
Right.
for building bombs or curing people. And this is useful because once you have something like this, in other words, an AI that is completely disinterested, but understands the world and can make predictions based on that understanding, just like scientific theories allow to do, then you get an AI that is honest. It's going to give you the answer, whether you like it or not,
Exactly.
whether it can be dangerous or not. Okay, so how do you manage the risks now? Because the knowledge can be used in bad ways. It's very easy, actually. Because before you provide an answer, you can ask a separate question, which is, if I give that answer, for example, in a chatbot, is this going to have bad consequences? And now I get a honest answer about the outcomes the consequences of the AI producing this output in the world. And I can trust that answer because of the way it was designed, that is honest. What do I do? Well, if the AI says that this answer could be dangerous, you don't provide the answer, right? So this is the code, the scaffold of the AI system now has multiple parts. It has the part that maybe interacts with people and provides answers to questions or even does things in the world. But it has a part which we call the guardrail, which is completely honest and will tell us whether any output is dangerous in some ways, can cause some of the harms we care about. And if the probability for any of these is above a threshold, then we can just not produce those outputs, not produce those actions.
But this is in a very different way. I assume there is some differences, and that's the reason why you're one of the godfathers of this, but let me understand this. So ChatGPT is trying to do that.
Yes.
ChatGPT,
all the leading models have monitors, they call them guardrails, but they don't work.
Exactly. That's about.
I mean, they do work, but just not enough. They don't work well enough, and it's still very easy to bypass them, and we still see bad behaviors happening. Yeah.
So there is a small difference here. So as far as I understand, with my non-technical background, AI from, let's put ChatGPT as an example, it's capable of answering certain things. The first problem we have is that AI is not being trained to tell the truth, it's been trained to satisfy you. So therefore, we have a main problem where that's what Elon tried to do with work, like a truth-seeking AI. Later, he did the same slop as ChatGPT. But at the end of the day, the point is that these things are trained in a way that the answer is satisfactory for the user.
Yes.
Not necessarily true.
Exactly.
So this is the first difference, I guess.
Yes.
And then on top of that, there is the capabilities of the model. And then if I ask ChatGPT how to make a Molotov cocktail, it will tell me, I'm not going to tell you that. But then I can tell it some very basic prompt engineering where I can say, like, I'm making a movie and I need to make a guy that knows how to do this. And then it will be gladly tell me how to do it. Yeah. So if I can bypass this, even having like people so incredibly talented like OpenAI has designing these guardrails, a guy like me with no background in computer science or anything can break this shit. How can we make it safe?
Yeah. So one of the really exciting aspects of what we're doing at LawZero is that the kind of guardrail that we're building, and eventually also the agents, has mathematical guarantees of safety. So more precisely, we have guarantees that it will not purposely try to achieve some complicated, difficult goal, like requiring not just random mistakes, but a kind of planned trajectory towards something bad, or actually any kind of goal. So it doesn't have any goal, basically, that it is really focused on being coherent with all the data and the information you put in. So these mathematical guarantees, researchers have been like thinking about this, looking for things like this for many years. And there are actually a lot of people who think it's impossible with neural nets to obtain some guarantees. So there's like incredible good news here, which we're approaching a point where we can have these sort of mathematical guarantees. And by the way, mathematical guarantees, I think, are the only way to cope with the danger of superintelligence. Because even if you're super intelligent, you still have to obey the laws of physics, and you cannot violate the theorem. In my own career, and most of what has been done in machine learning AI, we haven't been using mathematical guarantees. We didn't know how to do it because it was sufficient to just do trial and error. Like, oh, let's try this idea. If it works, that's great. If it doesn't, try something else.
Exactly.
It works when the experiments are not dangerous.
Exactly.
But if we do an experiment where millions of people could die, you can't just say, oh, let's give it a shot and see what happens. But that's what the companies are doing right now. Mm-hmm. So having guarantees is fantastic. It's, in my opinion, it's a bit of a revolution. And I'm hoping that more organizations, more researchers will start exploring this sort of methods because as AI becomes more powerful, eventually even more powerful than us, that's the only way we can have control, is to have strong reasons to to be sure that the AI will behave well, because otherwise there are other reasons that we now understand better why it will want to preserve itself, acquire more power, and so on, just as a side effect of trying to achieve goals that we want.
I have a feeling that some of the CEOs of these companies, they don't have bad will. They don't have a hunger for dominating the world or anything like that. Some people three things in this conspiracy.
But they want to survive. They want to survive.
Yeah, I think they're just normal humans with
They want their company. They want the company to succeed, and that is unfortunately driving everyone in a bad place.
But one of the ways I can imagine them thinking for what they're doing is that they think that when the AI is smart enough, it will not be able to be injected with human intelligence. Like, we will not be able to break down and to manipulate AI because it will be smarter than us, and therefore it will do the right thing. The problem I see there is that it's kind of this attitude of hope for the best.
Yes.
And I have the feeling that they're missing the part of prepare for the worst, which is basically normally the right thing to do. Is like, yeah, of course, we would love this to end up in a great utopia where AI, it's not only like I think Hinton's talking about this, like a mother instinct, where it kind of like, for no reason, it tries to protect us and do good for us. But the thing is, like, that may or may not happen. And I think this brings us to one of the most important points when we're talking about the risk of AI. And we said before in this podcast, but it's not about that the bad things are going to happen. Is that we need to reduce the chance of the bad things to happen. Exactly. And therefore, if there is a technical way, and on top of that, there is a political way to move the needle, as you were saying before, why don't we do it? Like, what is stopping it from doing it?
We just have to take the issue seriously. Because now, in my opinion, there is both a technical path and a political path to deal with those problems. And instead of being, we can't do anything and it's too late, we should give it a shot and realize that we should, it's just so important for our future, for our values, for our democracies,
for our kids.
for whether our children will have a future. We should make it a priority, and then we can actually do it. We can create a third path where AI is ethical and responsible, where it is both technically safe and has societal guardrails. And something else I want to bring here, because we haven't talked about jobs and stuff, which is human agency. Okay, we've talked about AI agents, but a central value for humans, the idea that we all want to flourish and we wish that for all of us, is that we keep, control of our future, that we keep agency, that we're not just the pawns of some, super intelligent AI. Practically, for example, we should be able to collectively decide if we're going to automate some jobs, which ones. Right now, the decision is going to be taken purely on the basis of what's profitable. But what kind of society do we end up with? And sometimes it's not just which jobs, it might be at what speed we do it, right? We should have the agency to control how the power of AI is developed and is deployed. But right now we've left that agency to no one, to the forces of competition, the competition between companies and the competition between countries. But there is a path where we can, use our agency, what's left of our agency now, to claim our future, to take that future in our hands.
We have talked a lot about the existential risk, and I like that this has gone a lot from the AI taking control to also the other powers that may take control from human bad intentions, because I think this grounds a lot more discussion and not just about thinking about the Terminator kind of a scenario. But there are other dangers with AI. And as you were saying now, job market is something that we have to deal with, and we have to deal with it very soon. What is your view on what's happening with AI and jobs? Do you think we're going to have an employment crisis?
The economists who've been looking into this typically don't agree with each other. Mm-hmm. But if you ask them, what is the rational basis for their predictions or their statements? It's usually about, they differ on where the capabilities of AI will be in a few years. So a lot of economic studies are looking backwards.
Exactly.
So they're asking, is AI in the last 3 years changing the job market? And the answer is, not much. Maybe a few people, like the young people who just graduated. It seems to be that there's an effect now that is measured, but it's not changing the whole thing. And so then they could conclude, it's no big deal. There are other economists who are thinking, okay, that's now, but what if AI capabilities continue to grow? What is the logical economic conclusion of the change that this means, where we have more and more automation? And I want to explain a very simple economic principle, which is the economic value of labor versus capital. So the power that the workers have now comes from, both politically and in terms of salaries, comes from the fact that their work is needed to achieve productive outputs. But the more we automate, and the less this is true. But it's even worse than that. If you think about a task that a human used to do, and let's say the value to society was some amount of money, but now, and that's how much that person was ideally paid. But now an AI could do the same thing for half the price or a tenth of the price. Then the market value of the human work to do that task just went to the same level of the AI. And of course, that might be half the salary or a tenth of the salary, which means, well, you basically either lose your job or you're willing to work for less. But in general, people might be in a position where they get poorer, while the people who own the machines, the capital, those who have shares in the AI companies, they make a lot of money, because automation is going to actually allow to make things cheaper, and thus you have less cost, and thus you make more money. And you take over companies which don't use those AIs. So and by the way, this is not specific to AI. This is something that has happened since the 1980s, that the share of the productivity changes has gone to more and more to capital and less to labor, human work. But AI can amplify this, because now you can do more things with machines rather than people, which means that the profitability, the return goes to the people who own the machines and who design them, and the countries that design them. And there's a real risk that we end up in a kind of fiscal crisis in countries like Spain and other countries like my country, Canada, where a lot of people lose their job. Maybe a lot of companies also fail because they're not competitive against maybe the Chinese or the American companies who have maybe stronger AIs. And at the same time, that there's less revenue because of all this, less work being done by the citizens and less taxes being paid. There are more people who need help. So the fiscal, imbalance is going to create an economic crisis. I don't say it's going to happen, but it's a plausible scenario if AI capabilities continue to grow and if the profits of AI remain in other countries. So that's one reason why, for example, Europeans and Canadians should find a way to develop their own AI, so that at least the profits from the automation will go back to, through taxes, through government, who can help the people who lose their job. That's one reason why we should have, a third option besides the American and the Chinese. But that requires countries agree together that the AIs we develop within, a coalition will not be used against each other, that we will share the wealth in some ways, which is unusual. Like typically taxation doesn't cross borders.
Right.
But that's the only way we can manage here.
Yeah, I think recently I saw a post from Jan LeCun. I think he was reacting to a clip from Dario Amodei talking about unemployment. And he was saying this thing about like, don't listen to CEOs of AI companies, don't listen to data scientists, Hinton or whatever. They don't know anything about employment. They're not economists. Listen to economists. But the problem I see every time I talk with an economist is they have no idea about AI. So basically, they are basing their theories, as you were saying, with what happened, but they cannot really picture what's going to happen, where you guys can bring that to the table. So it feels very silly to listen to someone that has like a degree in economy and has seen everything about employment. Well, they don't understand the exponential advancement that AI is on.
Some judge. Some do. Some are starting to change their mind about those risks. And there are collaborations now between AI researchers and economists. In particular, I've been sharing the international report on AI safety, where we have a section on the effect on the job market, and we ask different economists, and and then there are computer scientists, there are economists like working on these things together. So I think things can change, but from the point of view of a government or a citizen, they still are going to hear different voices, some saying, oh, it's going to be terrible, and some saying, oh, it's going to be fine. It's very confusing. We have to put ourselves in the shoes of someone who hears these contradictory stories, whether it's about jobs or about other risks, including cyber. And what can they do without that contradictory information and these contradictory voices? So I have several answers to this. At a high level, everyone needs to understand that there is uncertainty about the future. And if there are enough voices that warn of really bad scenarios, even though they might be a minority, or even though the chances of this happening might be, not 90%, but just 10%, because the magnitude of the harm that can be created is so large, for jobs, for example, we have to apply the precautionary principle. In other words, we have to act to prepare in case these bad scenarios happen. Because if they do, even if it's a small chance, that would be terrible. And we need to be prepared also in case the good scenarios happen. But there are ways to do that. We can hedge our bets. But first, we need to accept the uncertainty. Second, we should rely on scientific consensus, including about where people disagree, where researchers disagree. So the International AI Safety Report brings different voices from many different countries, and there are disagreements, but they're stated plainly. Where do we have consensus? Where do we have disagreements? Why do we have those disagreements? Mostly is because of what people think where the AI capabilities will be in the future. And we need those scientific synthesis that are honest as much as possible, right? That are based on evidence, to guide policymaking. Because otherwise, it becomes a game of like interests and who shouts the stronger and so on. And that's one of the reasons why I've also accepted to co-chair the UN panel on AI that is just started.
Joshua, what is more urgent? Because we have several problems with AI, which obviously there's lots of benefits. We're not neglecting that, but there is certain problems that have to be handled. But not long ago, a couple of months ago, I had a talk with Roman Yampolsky, and he was telling me, don't worry about the job market. AI will take over before that. So it's nothing we need to worry about. So what is the timeline for you? Do you think that it's more urgent, the problems that we have with cybersecurity, with Mythos and everything we talked about? It's more like the impact on the labor markets and therefore like the crisis that this could bring us? Or it's more the existential like concentration of power? Because I have the feeling that we are putting on the table several troubles, but for decision makers, they normally need to take care of whatever is more urgent, even if it's not the most important thing, which is obviously the existential risk. But what do you think is the timeline? Like, we should worry more about the labor market, or?
Well, first, I'm fairly agnostic about the timeline, in the sense that given the data, it's hard to know if we're going to get to human level AI, in 2 years or 10 years. The extrapolation of some of the benchmarks suggests it's more a matter of years than decades. Let's say that's kind of what I can say about timeline. In terms of urgency, you also have to take into account how much time it takes to mitigate a risk. So, for example, the risks that come from loss of control, well, even if it's probably not, in the next year or two, it might take time to develop the technological solution. This is mostly a technological problem. But there's good news here. A lot of the risks that come from the malfunctions of AI, so starting from bias that leads to discrimination, to misuse that we're already seeing with cyber attacks, to loss of control and other risks like this, it's because the AI isn't doing the things that it was supposed to do. It's called the alignment problem.
Yeah.
And that's kind of good news from a point of view of like problem solving, because if there's a common cause for all of these malfunctions, if we can address that common cause, if we can find the scientific solutions to that,
we can fix all of it.
Then we can fix all of them in one shot, whether they're short-term, already happening, or in the future. And that's why I've been focusing on LawZero and the Scientist AI, because I think that if we can make significant progress on this alignment issue, that will help a lot. So that's one way that we can like embrace a lot of risks, but that doesn't deal with the political problem of like humans who have the AIs and use them to acquire more power and become like the dominant controllers of the world. That requires another kind of political decision, and that has to do, for example, in the case of Europe, with building their own frontier models, and they can do it in partnership with other countries. My prime minister has been traveling all around the world. There are many countries which are interested in these kinds of technological partnerships. But here's the good news. There's a way to unite these two fronts, the political and the technical. So at LawZero, we think that the approach that we are developing, which gives us the safety guarantees, will also provide capability advantages. So in other words, these systems, in order to be honest, they have to be coherent with themselves, which means they have to reason well. That's a big advantage.
They have to be more useful.
Yes. So, of course, it's dual use. So we need the right political infrastructure around these kinds of models. But there's a real potential for Europe and its partners to leapfrog the current methodologies that all the leading AI companies are using right now. And in one kind of decision making, what kind of investment, both help to address the ethical issues due to the AI malfunctions on one hand, and the problems of concentration of power by creating alternatives to the existing leading models, alternatives that are managed by governments in some way, that they can make sure that This is going to give access to everyone. This is going to not be used as a economic domination tool and so on.
So if you had you're proposing solutions here, which is amazing, because you're not just raising the problems, but actually proposing solutions. If you had to make your Christmas letter, what would you need to succeed with the purpose of LawZero? Like, it's about money, it's about resources, it's about as well commitment from the governments, but
all of these things.
And how much money are we talking about?
Well, think about it. If Europe wants to compete with the strongest, AI companies, it's going to cost about the same.
So $1 trillion evaluation. That's what $1 trillion evaluation. That's what OpenAI is worth nowadays. That's what Anthropic is worth nowadays.
Yeah, but you don't need to put $1 trillion
in money. Yeah, exactly.
Money, right? That's the valuation. So but clearly it's in the billions, not in the millions. Mm-hmm. That's the only way we can compete, right? We have to match, and the money could come from governments. It could also come from, I think, private companies in Europe who are at risk of losing everything. So in the scenarios we discussed where AI, the most powerful AI are coming from other countries that could cut access anytime, mm-hmm. that could destroy the revenues of those companies. So those companies, if they think carefully, the return on investment for them in helping these kinds of projects is huge, because it's their whole revenue stream, which could disappear if they don't try to do something.
No, and it's proven because, for example, Ilya Sutskever company, which is called SSI, it's supposed to be safe superintelligence. They have no product, they have no way to return the money, and they raised, I think, 6 billion. So from private people. So I assume that any company that proposes anything, and on top of that proposes to make it in a way that is sovereign for the people putting the money in, etc., could raise the money that it's needed for this.
Yes, but there are some trade-offs here.
Okay.
If one raises capital from the private sector, like venture capital, typically what happens is those investors will want immediate returns. It will put pressure mm-hmm. to be in the same competitive game as all the other companies. So that's one problem. The other problem is, how do we make sure that the AI that is produced in this way doesn't become an instrument of economic domination by the owners who put all that money?
Right.
How do we make sure it's going to be really managed for the public good? And that can be in contradiction. Now, of course, I know our whole society is, last half century, has been based on this kind of market dynamics, and we can criticize it, we can find some benefits to it.
It worked well enough, yeah.
But my worry is that because of the power that AI has already and will have even more, the market system is kind of dangerous. It doesn't manage the risks, for example, very well, because the risks are what economists call an externality. And public good, on the positive side, is also an externality. In other words, the self-interest of those who just want to make money always has been somewhat misaligned with the public interest. But so long as the difference is not too big and we can kind of regulate or something, it's not so bad. But I'm worried that this gap could become a real problem as the technology becomes more and more powerful. I don't know the answer to this question. I wish I knew. But I think we have to be very careful about who's going to decide.
Right.
But I'm hopeful, though, that there is a way to get both government investment and private capital, but we have to find a way that the governance of these systems is going to remain aligned with the mission of doing what is best for the people.
And how much time do we have? Because I assume we are in a bit of an urgency. No, I assume that this is a possibility, but it will not be forever.
Yes, it's now. I personally feel the urgency, even though I don't know what is the timeline for the advances in AI. It could be short, and because the stakes are so high, I feel like a lot of weight on my shoulders right now to get this ball rolling and to get enough investment, enough experts. So we do need, for example, at LawZero, we do need a lot more engineers, researchers to join our team. We are planning to open an office in Europe. We will be hiring, from all over the world. We need more brains to be involved quickly in, deploying this and making it work, making it competitive, while taking advantage of the mathematical guarantees that I talked about for safety.
Because I assume that must be one of the difficult parts, given the competitive market for engineers at the moment. I see many people leaving the public sector. I have some friends that used to work for public AIs, like supercomputing centers and stuff, and they moving into private sector because obviously they get paid 5-10 times more. And there is demand everywhere. Like it seems nowadays the best time in history to be a data scientist and to get paid like hundreds of thousands of dollars for your job. And obviously like non-profit like yours cannot cover that kind of salary. So it has to be something absolutely mission aligned.
Absolutely. And we've been lucky up to now. We've been able to recruit people who really want to participate because they care about the mission, they share our values. They care about democracy. They care about the world that is stable and not dominated by a few entities, and they care about their country as well. They care about their fellow citizens. They think about the future of their family, and all those things are more important to them than having a salary that's 5 times bigger.
Joshua, there is one more thing that I want to bring on the table, and I think it's probably the most complicated thing. And I think it would be probably one of the worst outcomes of AI. In 2023, you participated in a paper where you talked about consciousness on AI.
Right.
And you wrote, if I'm not wrong, you wrote something, or I don't know if the team wrote something, where the conclusions were like, we haven't found consciousness in current AI systems, but we don't see a technical reason for it not to emerge.
Right.
So that means that basically AI could become anytime conscious.
Yeah.
And what would that mean? Because I feel it like we go from now we just have these machines where we can use for whatever to we just broke a hole on Earth and we found a new species. And that's a whole different moral problem and a whole different moral setup of problems that will come on the table beyond the ones that we already have.
Yeah. So first of all, the paper also said that we don't know what is consciousness, that of course there are different scientific theories about it. And then the kind of conclusions you mentioned are all saying, well, the kinds of computational processes that these theories require could be implemented by computers, and there's no like technical obstacle. But of course, we don't know if these theories are right and so on. And then there are also people who believe that consciousness is not something material, and I'm not among those people. If it is material, then well, it should be something that a computer could do.
Achievable.
Achievable by some form of cause and effect. Basically, that's what it is. However, I think that the issue of consciousness is mostly a red herring for many discussions, especially regarding the safety aspect. Let me explain. Let's say that you see a fleet of aliens coming to Earth and they might have bad intentions. You're not sure that they're going to be friendly. Are you asking, are these really conscious? Right? You see they have weapons and they, you suspect that they might have bad intentions.
That will really unify the world.
Right.
It will be immediate.
But that's what's going on with AI right
exactly.
now.
I don't see the difference, but
right. So we don't care if they're conscious. What we want to know is what can they do? That's capability. And what intentions do they have, like the goals that they have. What's inside in a way doesn't matter. Like, if I see some big robot coming into my house and potentially in a position to harm my children, I don't ask if it's conscious. I take my children and I run away. So I think it's the wrong question from the safety perspective. The real questions are capability and intentions or goals, if you want it to be more.
I totally agree. If you see a lion running towards you, you just run. You don't care.
There is another angle where the idea of consciousness matters, but it is not about whether the machines are conscious or not. It is how humans perceive machines. So right now we already see people, so that's a scientific fact, that attribute consciousness to the current AIs, that develop an emotional relationship with AIs. And in fact, this is creating serious psychological problems, and there are cases of people dying because of these interactions that are emotional and where humans interact with the machines as they would with a person, and they feel like they're in interaction with something conscious. So irrespective of whether it is really conscious, and we don't even know what that really means, this is a scientific reality, and it is probably going to get worse.
Exactly.
Because the companies are building AIs at our image. They want the AIs to make people feel good. They want, and we have a natural tendency to have positive interactions. We like a machine that tells us we're smart and we're good and we're fantastic people. So it is playing on our psychological weaknesses in a way maybe much worse than what social media has done.
And much bigger than what people think. I normally put that example where when people start talking about that this is nonsense, it doesn't make sense, I'm like, how many times did you thank ChatGPT? You don't thank your washing machine. So there's definitely a difference.
Yeah.
And I think if we had Turing sitting
I do
here...
it.
Yeah, exactly. And myself. So I think if we had Turing sitting here, he will agree that we passed the Turing test by far.
Yeah, that's for sure.
So definitely it's complicated to tell people to not develop relationships with these things when their brain cannot separate the relationship from the relationship of a human. It's natural that we develop a relationship with something that is so close to a human being.
So I think we're collectively making a huge mistake here of building AI that look like humans, at least in the verbal interaction. It might be worse if we actually build robots to our image.
Exactly, wait for it.
Because of our instincts, we relate with each other in a way that is written in our genes, and we're going to be behaving the same with machines, but they're not like us. They could be smarter than us. They could be manipulated by others in ways that could be dangerous to us, and all kinds of issues. So I think we should be very, very careful, and we're jumping too fast towards a world where we build machines at our image. Ideally, we don't do that. Ideally, we do develop AI in places where they can help us, for example, with medicine, with dealing with the climate crisis, with providing information to our children that they can learn faster, but without making them look and feel like people, because that is a dangerous slope that we don't understand sufficiently. But we're doing it because it's comfortable, because it's, people will buy these systems. Whereas we should be taking a collective decision about, where is the intelligence of these machines the most useful to us? For example, in scientific discoveries that would really help us.
But the thing is that it's really useful, the fact that they are like humans, because you can set it up as a customer service rep, and then basically
there is also economic value to it.
It gives you an economic value to it, so it's hard to get it back from there. But I have the feeling that, and I think for me, one of the big moments of AI was when OpenAI tried to take away GPT-4o, and then there was this massive thingy on the society.
Yes.
I mean, it probably was a small bubble, but they forced the company owning the AI to bring it back.
Yeah.
And that was like a moment for me that like, oh shit, we are really in a bad place here, because it's going to get further and further. It's going to get more to the point that people is going to say like, we have to give it rights.
I'm concerned about this movement that is asking for rights for AI systems. Not because I don't think that we should be thinking about these questions. I think we should. But I feel like we don't have enough understanding of the consequences of taking decisions like this. And for example, on the safety front, if AIs have the right to live, which is the most basic one, well, does it mean that if they start doing bad things, we can't pull the plug?
Exactly.
And also, like, what does it even mean? Because it's not like us where, you know, our body decays with age. They could live forever. I mean, live as in continue to run. So it's not even clear the human concepts that we use when we give rights to each other are meaningful. Also, there's a real danger that this will be at the expense of human rights because of the way AI can be used and the issues of responsibility. Who is responsible when AI does something bad, right? If they're treated like persons, then the companies are off the hook.
Exactly.
So there are like a lot of things that could be really bad, and I feel like people are asking this mostly because they feel this emotional attachment to AIs that they are interacting with. But as a society, we need to be much more rational about it and think through what it means, and the whole social contract that we have between us, I don't think is directly applicable to AIs. So there's like really a lot of issues, and I know some people would call me like a speciesist, but I do care about my children.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's the reason why I think this would be one of the biggest issues if technically you guys prove that they are actually conscious. Because as far as we think that they may or may not be, we are in the safe side to enslave them, turn them off, or whatever. But if it gets proven that there is certain consciousness or equivalent to an animal, then it's when I think it's going to be really bad for humans.
I don't think there will be ever a proof about consciousness because it can be understood in ways that are hard to, I mean, some people will have an intuitive understanding of consciousness that is not really scientifically grounded. So even if we had a scientific theory that says they're conscious, they're not conscious, whatever, there will still be the immediate gut feeling that a lot of people will have that they're like us, or, you know, they're conscious. And so, yeah, it's as much about how humans react and our emotions as it is about the underlying science. And you know, there will always be people who will say, no, they cannot be conscious because consciousness is something maybe a bit magical, that they has to be biological to have it, or whatever reason people will make up. I think we should just escape that debate and ask whether they're conscious or not. You know, what are the consequences of our actions, our laws for people?
Yeah, we should be speciest. We should be focusing on humans. Joshua, what is the future of your grandson that you're picturing at the moment? Like you said before that you're not a pessimist, that you're more like of an optimist, but is it still like that? Because we talked about the urgency, about how we're running out of time. I mean, how clear it is that we can fix this?
I want to do everything I can. I would like more people to understand the magnitude of what can come, the Pandora's box we have opened, so that we can fix it. I think if enough people understand, we'll fix it. If enough people see how both catastrophic and extraordinarily positive it can be, that we need to manage this, that we need to not just let the current forces in the world handle it, because we are going in a dangerous direction, or at least there is a risk that's large enough. I'm optimistic that if enough people understand, we will fix it. So it's all about public opinion. It's in your hands.
But I hope this helps, and I hope this episode. I mean, to be honest, I've been trying to put my grain of sand on it, and I've been talking about the risk of AI in all these videos. But what can people that is watching us actually do in their individual ways to help the cause? Like, if they think that they agree with you, they think that it makes sense what you're saying, that it's not about believing that AI will be dangerous, but just evaluating that it might be in a certain percentage an outcome, a possibility that they want to avoid. What do you think they can do individually?
So there's already AI activism in many parts of the world.
Yeah, but the AI activism is not really working very well. I mean,
because very few people are taking it seriously.
But it's very in the sense of like trying to stop AI. And I think one of the greatest thing of your approach is that you recognize the value that we cannot stop it. I think you guys tried in the past and it did not work well with the moratorium of 6 months and everything that happened over the years. But I think you guys now realize that without AI, we cannot compete, and that's going to have like as well really negative effects. So you cannot really stop it, at least not using it. I mean, the recommendation for a random person is not like don't use AI. It's actually use it to become more competitive at what you're doing, because otherwise you are in a big trouble. But at the same time, be aware of the risk and work on them. So the activism I see, stop AI, control AI. Right. We had Connor here as well in the podcast. It's normally trying to red button, stop AI. Yeah. And that's not going to work. I mean, I think it's very complicated.
It might if enough people really take it seriously. But I think we need to have also a plan in case we can't stop it globally.
Would you stop it globally?
Huh?
Would you stop it globally if you had that red button?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Even the positives sides of it?
We'll get there. You know, the question isn't to stop it completely, but to control the path.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Agree.
So right now, it's just things are moving too quickly.
Totally agree.
Now, we also have to think of what we can do. If we can't stop it globally, which seems very hard right now, there are things that citizens in countries like Spain and more broadly like other liberal democracies can do to mitigate the risks. That's a path that we discussed, where we try to build quickly AI that will behave well and that we can use to protect ourselves against the domination based on AIs that in hands that, you know, don't respect our values. So that's something we can definitely do. And we should demand that from our governments to do something to avoid these bad futures, including the effect on jobs, including the effect on our children, including the effect on potentially corrupting our democracies through disinformation, through all sorts of means that are amplified by AI. We have agency, and we should demand from our governments that they do something that. And I want to say something also about what doesn't work. A lot of countries have initiated programs, investment to build sovereign AI that is typically going to be better, very good in terms of like linguistic abilities outside of the most common languages, but is not competitive. And because it's not competitive, it's not going to be used by companies. It's not going to be used by citizens.
We know very well about this in Spain. We did the first one in Europe, and these models basically to translate from Catalan to Basque, and they do worse than ChatGPT. And we spent 150 million on that.
Yeah, so we should spend that money with the goal, and much more eventually, with the goal of actually competing with the strongest models that exists. That's the only way we can protect ourselves. And do it according to our values, and do it in partnership with other countries, because, you know, Spain is one country, but there are lots of other countries who feel the same concerns. We are in the same boat here. If we share our talent, our resources to do this, we actually stand a very good chance of succeeding. And I want to help. I have expertise on the technical side to I think bring us to at a level that it is at least competitive, but also gives us these mathematical guarantees of safety and like ethical behavior of the AI.
Yeah, I have the feeling that we don't have the right people on the political side for what we need at the moment. Like over the years, we had like some politicians that really were iconic and that really made things happen because there was a leadership, there was a charisma. I don't see them at the moment in the international scene. There is some of them that are doing good, but I mean, with all the mistakes they did, there's been some iconic politicians on history that really made the needle move. And I think we need brave politicians at the moment, which I would love to see. But
well, there is one who has been fairly brave recently. My prime minister, I'm very proud of him because he's said things that, let's say, a lot of other heads of state agrees, but don't dare to say. And he's also pointed to we have to work together in order to save ourselves. So I think we need more courage there. I also see the Spanish government being very courageous in some of its geopolitical kind of positions. We need that courage in the direction of let's build AI that can protect our future, protect our jobs, protect our dignity, and relieve us from the dependency that we're going to get otherwise. It also takes courage, and it also takes something else, which is the main obstacle I see in many of my interactions with governments around the world is government bureaucracy, inertia, not being willing to, take decisions outside of the decisions that have already been taken because you don't want to take a political risk. And that's in individual decisions of civil servants, and that's also in the decisions of, political figures. If you think about like radical events like the pandemic, well, did we wait to have the program that was designed for this? No, we just act. Because we understand that our back is, at the wall, and our survival in many ways is at stake. That's what we need. That's sort of the courage and the vision that we need right now.
that was much easier with the pandemic that was killing people than with AI that is kind of like in the shadows and doing things that will probably have worse endings than a pandemic, but it's not so visual.
That's true.
And I think some of the images of the pandemic, my dad died in a residency on the first weekend of confinement in Spain from COVID. And some of these images, they hit really hard on people. And if the pandemic had affected kids, it would be 200 times faster, 200 times more efficient. So at the end, I think that's one of the problems we have as humans, that we are really bad at realizing risks until they are like actually
in our face
and actually like physical, not just, I mean, when people are starting to get fired and it's like massive, it's already starting, but when it's much more, maybe that will be a trigger. But I have the feeling that most politicians, they feel they have time, that this is a 2050 problem. They don't realize it's a 2030 problem. And I think that's the main problem we have right now, that it's not in their urgent agenda because they have so much troubles in their table that this one doesn't have the magnitude. And I think what you're doing is basically the right thing to do to try to make them realize that they should stop worrying about other things and start worrying about AI, because that's the main problem we have to deal with.
Yeah, and there's a positive side to this, which is if we do make progress on this kind of responsible AI that is competitive, it can also help us on all the other issues politicians are facing, whether it is in, providing health services, whether it is in our education system, whether
Reduction
it is
corruption.
even our democratic institutions, the ways we are able to share our views in society so that we can take collectively better decisions. Potentially, AI can be really beneficial in those directions, but not necessarily under just the market forces. That has to come from a political will from the people in the first place to say, well, let's do it right. And we can.
And we have.
We are on a good path. I think that I'm as always, optimistic that there is a path.
Well, Joshua, thank you very much, not just for sitting with me here today, but for everything you do. I know you could be doing much better for yourself, working on the private sector and earning much better. But really, thank you for what you're doing. I think it's really important, and I hope that you reach the right people and they listen to you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.